Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, your ticket to all things college football. Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? Join us as we talk college football from the national championship to college rivalries to bowl games to the Heisman Trophy to which conference is the best. We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Danielle. I'm so sorry this is going out a little late today. It is currently Sunday night. I have been sick all weekend. When I tell you it's not coronavirus or anything, don't worry. I have the worst stomach flu. Literally could not get out of bed. I felt awful. I was literally just watching college football on the couch, whatever. I didn't really want to talk about that. But hi guys, welcome back. It is a lovely Sunday night when you're listening to this. I hope you guys all had a really good weekend, a nice weekend of watching football. It was a big upset weekend, which we'll get into. Today is going to be an instant reactions pod. I also want to apologize for there not being a Thursday podcast. I had 3 exams in school and 3 essays to write, and a ton of stuff for grad school applications and everything. So it was a very stressful week, and I'm thankful my bosses let me take Thursday off because I was drowning and I was so overwhelmed. And I wish I could have gotten an episode up for you guys. I had a great outline and everything, but that's okay. It's okay, you guys. So without further ado, let's get into our instant reactions this week, everybody. It was a big upset week, which was pretty exciting. I feel like this is the biggest week we've had in college football. You know, Oklahoma went down, Mississippi State went down, Auburn went down, Texas A&M got demolished. So let's get into it, everybody. Our first game we're going to go over is Virginia versus number 1 Clemson. This is 21-3. Excuse me, I have the score wrong there. It is not 21-3. No, momentary pause. 41-23. Thank you. So 41-23, Clemson. Trevor Lawrence was pretty happy with Clemson's win over Virginia. This was also the top-ranked Tigers' first really challenge, I guess you could say. Lawrence threw for 329 yards and 3 touchdowns, and they opened the season 3-0 for the 6th straight year. The Tigers, who are now 3-0 overall and 2-0 in the ACC, they were not crisp at times versus Virginia, who was 1-1 overall. Like in the past few years, they were pressed against the Cavaliers. Lawrence said, I guess we had a pretty good position when we're kind of disappointed in an 18-point win. I'm really glad we got challenged in some new ways. Part of being a great team is making adjustments and getting better. A big part is having talented players like Lawrence, tailback Travis Etienne, and receiver Amari Rodgers. Etienne, who I've talked about in the past, was supposed to go to the NFL last season, but opted to stay back for his senior year. He ran for 115 yards and a score. He also caught a 4-yard scoring pass. Rodgers had 2 touchdown catches in the final 6 minutes of the opening half, which gave Clemson a 24-3 lead. So as you guys can see, they kind of squelched that lead a little. Virginia cut it close to 27-17 at midway through the 3rd period. But that is when Lawrence found Etienne for a final scoring throw to restore Clemson's momentum and ultimately seal the win. It definitely took some time for Clemson to fire up. This was their return from a bye week. They were just 3-0 in the first quarter when Etienne went for a 16-yard run. Virginia, pounded by the Tigers 62-17 last December in the ACC championship game, fought back to make it 27-17 midway through the 3rd. Like I said, definitely a revenge game, if you will, for the Cavaliers. Virginia did make it into the top 25 last year, but Dabo Swinney, compared to the game, just taking a little bit Robustin for a cough with his team's stumbles. Dabo Swinney still said his players can come out with the win and will learn from this one. We have a lot to improve on. We've got to improve. This was the 38th game with at least one touchdown for Etienne. There was some mishaps, if you will, in the offensive zone, but Clemson offensive coordinator Tony Elliott said, "I think he got to the zone every time he touched the ball." Said of a teen. The Cavaliers put up 417 yards, the most given up by Clemson in an ACC game the last 2 seasons, and they outgained the Tigers on the ground 147 to 137. Yes, so let's get into some social justice efforts. Clemson continued their social justice initiatives with several players wearing messages on their jerseys with their names, usually are. A teen wore peace on his uniform, while Rogers and backup running back Lynn J. Dixon wrote equality. This came a few days after Sweeney said he wasn't in favor of social justice or any messaging of uniforms because he's a traditionalist when it comes to the look of college jerseys. A little bit of controversy there, if you will. But yep, number 1 Clemson stays undefeated and continues a dominant streak. Next up, we have Vanderbilt versus number 20 LSU. If you guys remember last week, LSU got demolished by the previously unranked Mississippi State in their first game of the season. Kind of an upset. Well, LSU came back this week with a pounding 41-7 win over Vanderbilt. They proved they could protect their quarterback, and Miles Brennan showed what he could do when he needed to throw. Brennan threw for 337 yards and 4 touchdowns. And number 20 LSU bounced back to beat Vanderbilt 41-7 on a Saturday night. The defending champions never trailed after losing their season opener last week to Mississippi State, where Brennan was sacked 7 times. They also extended their streak over the Commodores, the Vanderbilt Commodores, to 9 in a series that leads 24-7-1. LSU coach Ed Orgeron said, "It's a step. Last week we were not pleased, obviously, and that's not LSU Tiger football. Tonight was LSU football. We played like LSU Tigers. You know what? We practiced like it." The Tigers outgained Vanderbilt 498-266, and the defense came up with 2 interceptions and a pair of sacks. Brennan did complete passes to 11 different receivers against a Vanderbilt defense that had consistent pressure against Kellen Mond in its opening loss to Texas A&M. Brennan said, "We got out and performed the way we wanted to perform. We still have a lot to improve. It wasn't perfect by any means." Vanderbilt had its chance with freshman Ken Seals making its home debut when Randall Hine picked up an overthrown pass from Brennan. Seals hit it to tight end Ben Breshan with an 8-yard touchdown pass to pull the Commodores to 14-7 in the second quarter. However, they did not score again. This was a dominating win by the LSU Tigers, who were looking for a comeback after their week 1 loss, and they're defending champions after all, and their job in the polls was definitely a motivation factor. The offense clicked pretty well, and they didn't need more than 1 minute and 53 seconds on any of their first 5 scoring drives. Brennan was sacked 7 times as the opener. He wasn't even taken on once in the game, however. So, big game there. Next up on our list of games we're going through, bigger game, you guess you could say. I mean, obviously all games are big, but Georgia and Auburn, a classic rivalry. I have a friend that goes to Georgia, and she always is so excited for the Auburn game. So number 7, Auburn, went to Athens, Georgia, to play against number 4, Georgia. This was not a close battle by any means. Georgia romped the Auburn Tigers 27-6. Stenson Bennett threw for 240 yards and a touchdown. This was solidifying his hold on the quarterback job after he started last week when JT Daniels was unable to play. Number 4 Georgia romped number 7 Auburn 27-6. The Bulldogs buried Auburn with a 24-0 blitz in the first half, getting a pair of 1-yard TDs from Zamir White to extend their domination of the Deep South's oldest rivalry. Bennett described this win as pretty cool. It's so easy to play football when the defensive plays as well as they did, when they run the ball as well as we did, and the guys on the outside make plays like we did. Bennett was never viewed as a starting quarterback candidate for the Bulldogs. He initially walked on at Georgia, left for a junior college season in the hopes of boosting his chances of playing elsewhere, and only returned to the Bulldogs last season when they desperately needed an experienced backup over Jake Fromm. He was far on the depth chart over the summer. Jamie Newman and JT Daniels were transfers who had started at other schools. And redshirt freshman DeJuan Mathis was viewed as a talented prospect. When Newman opted out for the season, Bennett was still taking snaps with the third team. After Mathis struggled in the season opener at Arkansas and Daniels was still not cleared to play after going major knee surgery, Bennett came in and threw a pair of touchdown passes, like I said, against Arkansas last week, which we'll get into this week as well. But this earned him a start against Auburn, where he performed exceptionally, throwing for 17-28, 240 yards, 1 touchdown with a QB quarterback rating of 91.6. He also, he added one run on the yard for negative 15 yards according to the box score. But, like I said, Auburn was held to a pair of field goals. The offense could not get behind Bo Nix, who completed just 21 of 40 passes for 177 yards. The running game only added 39 yards and a 1.8 per yard average per carry consistency. Nix's run of 251 consecutive passes without an interception was snapped in the third quarter. And as Nick said, they played about as good as they could, and we just played about the worst we could play, and it showed on the field. We got beat. Georgia did rush for 202 yards as well. The big takeaway for this is that Auburn coach Gus Malzahn is to face renewed criticism after his offense turned in another miserable performance against the Bulldogs. Could he be on the hot seat? Probably not, but we'll see. And for Georgia, he was willing to play multiple quarterbacks against Auburn, but it wasn't necessary with Bennett's performance. They call him the mailman, and he is rapidly becoming one of college football's feel-good stories of 2020. Though Smart won't hesitate to turn to Mathis or Daniels if the offense bogs down. Stinson has got to get better. He's got to get smarter. He's not one of those kids who thinks he's arrived. I'm sure he'll be right back in here working to get better for next week. Next up, Auburn will play Arkansas, who had a dominating upset against Mississippi State today, next week at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and Georgia hosts a second straight ranked opponent when number 21 Tennessee visits Stanford Stadium. Speaking of Arkansas and Mississippi State, let's get into our next game, which was Arkansas versus number 16 Mississippi State. If you guys remember last week, Mississippi State had a romping upset over the defending champions LSU, with KJ Costello and Mike Leach making their dominant presence in the SEC welcomed. There are many talks about Mike Leach. What is he doing to SEC? Well, that kind of all came crashing down this week, and we could be looking at Mississippi State being a one-week wonder on the top 25 poll, as they were unranked last week and now are number 16. Almost 3 years since Arkansas last won an SEC conference game. The Razorbacks took down a team that was the talk of college football last week. Felipe Franks threw 2 touchdown passes, and Arkansas intercepted KJ Costello 3 times as the Razorbacks broke a 20-game SEC losing streak by upsetting number 16 Mississippi State 21-14 on Saturday night. If you guys don't remember, last week Arkansas put up a fight against number 4 Georgia, who they did win the game, but it was not easy for them until Bennett came in. But here is what first-year Arkansas quarterback Sam Pittman said: "The mood in the locker room was probably everything you'd expect. The kids have gone for a long time." Excuse me, not quarterback, coach. The kids have gone for a long time without having any opportunity to win against a team, and that's a ranked football team. And for us to come in here and place and win, the guys are ecstatic. A week after record-breaking and upsetting LSU, the Mississippi State Bulldogs and new head coach Mike Leach hardly looked like the same team. Costello went 43 of 59 for 313 yards and 1 touchdown, but he had those 3 interceptions. As of Mike Leach, what he said is, "I didn't think we read the field very well. Most of our problems out there, offense, defense, special teams, was because our eyes weren't in the right place. We're not experienced enough or talented enough for that." Costello and the air raid shredded LSU for a Southeastern Conference record, 623 yards. Last week, the Bulldogs turned over on downs in the red zone twice in the fourth quarter and lost a fumble against Arkansas. Overall, they were 16 of 17 on third down. Costello said after the game, "There is so much momentum to be had that we didn't seize, regardless of the coverage. I mean, we completed the ball all over the field, but we've got to be finished in critical situations, and have got to take care of the football. Bottom line." Kalen Hill, the Bulldogs' leading rusher from a year ago, left the game after taking a hard hit in the first quarter and never returned. Greg Brooks Jr. returned an interception 69 yards for a touchdown pass to put Arkansas, who is now 1-1, on top early, and the Razorbacks led 14-7 at half. "It was just a start," Frank said, quarterback for the Arkansas Razorbacks. "It was a great start. We'll celebrate, and the next week prepare to get another one. That's the thing with the SEC. It's not a one-week schedule. We'll enjoy it, but we'll try to get back to work and try to get a win." Like I said, Arkansas had not won an SEC game since beating Mississippi Ole Miss October 28th, 2017, according to AP poll, or AP Press statistics, under Brett Berleman. The last 2 seasons under Chad Morris, the Razorbacks went winless in the SEC, and then they hired Pittman, a long-time offensive line coach, away from Georgia. Poll implications: Mississippi State looks to be a one-week wonder. I don't see Arkansas moving up in the polls. But next week, Arkansas will face Auburn, and Mississippi State will head to Kentucky. Let's move away from the SEC and talk about UCF. They've kind of been the Cinderella story of college football the last few seasons, I want to say. But that all came crashing down today as we have another upset with Tulsa, who proved fairly well against Oklahoma State a few weeks ago. They took down number 11 UCF 34-26. There's just something about UCF that brings out the best of Tulsa. Zach Smith threw 3 touchdown passes, and Tulsa erased an 18-point first-half deficit to beat number 11 UCF 34-26. This snapped the Knights' 21-game home winning streak Saturday night. The Golden Hurricanes made it 2 straight wins over UCF, who have been plagued by penalties and turned the ball over 3 times. Tulsa coach Philip Montgomery said, "New year, new season. We've got a lot of talent on this football team on the road in a tough environment. I'm proud of these guys for sticking together. We've always been a gritty, tough, hard-nosed football team, and we proved that once again." UCF drove into Tulsa territory, but after a penalty holding pushed the Knights out of the red zone. Dylan Gabriel for the UCF Knights was 28 of 51 for 330 yards with a touchdown and an interception. There were opportunities in the game that we didn't take advantage of. I put this out there. There needs to be better QB play. I need to execute at a higher level. Tulsa was the last team to beat UCF at home with a 35-20 win on November 9th, 2016. The Golden Hurricanes also upset UCF last season 31-31 in Tulsa. UCF led 23-5 with 1 minute remaining in the second quarter. However, Tulsa quickly answered to make the score 23-12 at halftime. Tulsa recovered a fumble on the opening kickoff of the second half, and on the next play, Smith threw a 34-yard touchdown pass to Sam Crawford Jr. The big takeaway for this is that the Golden Hurricanes have had 2 major wins over UCF in the last 5 games, and the Knights, who are a long-shot college football playoff, their hopes take a big turn. Next up, you guys, we got another big ranked opponent. This wasn't really an upset, I guess you could say, because this quote-unquote rivalry has not been fairly even matched over the last few years, as you may know. We have number 13, Texas A&M, against number 2, Alabama. Final score was 52-24, excuse me. The Alabama Crimson Tide looked dominant in this. Mac Jones launched his first pass to John Mechie III for a 78-yard touchdown. That was a sign of things to come. Jones passed for a career high, 435 yards and 4 touchdowns. And number 2, Alabama romped past number 13, Texas A&M, 52-24. This wasn't even a battle from the very beginning. Briefly threatened early, however, Jones and the Crimson Tide flexed their considerable big play muscle in the passing game to put away the Aggies. Jones tops his initial score with an 87 touchdown to Waddle, who sprinted past 2 Aggies defenders. Max Jones said, we got to showcase that early. He finished 19 of 16 for a second straight surgically precise performance, married by 1 interception off a deflection. We won, so that's a good game. Najee Harris rushed for 2 short touchdowns, and safety Danielle Wright scored on a 47-yard interception against Texas A&M starter Kellen Mond. Mond did put up big numbers. He completed 25 of 44 for 318 yards with 3 touchdowns, but he had a pick 6. The big takeaway for this is that Alabama, any questions about the production of the Tide after Tua Tagovailoa, Jerry Jeudy, and Henry Ruggs Jr. left for the NFL has been answered. The defense is still not dominating all 4 quarters, however. Poll implications for this is that Alabama will expect to stay at number 2 given that Clemson won today, and Texas A&M is expected to fall, especially since they're playing another top 5 team. They're playing another top 5 team, Florida, next week. All right, that was a short little recap, but let's get into number 17, Oklahoma State, going against the Kansas Jayhawks. They romped the Kansas Jayhawks 47-14. Not much to talk about here. After a couple of ho-hum performances against Tulsa and West Virginia for the Oklahoma State Cowboys, they took advantage of a backpedaling Kansas defense. Shane Ellingsworth threw for 265 yards and 3 touchdowns. Chaba Howard ran for 145 yards and 2 more scores. And the Cowboys were so ahead by the third quarter that they were able to rest most of their starters for the final 20 minutes. Tylan Wallace caught 9 catches for 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. Oklahoma State finished with 298 yards through the air and 295 on the ground for 593 yards of total offense. The Jayhawks, Danielle and Mike Miles Kendrick were combined 14 of 24 for 92 yards and a pick. The running game generated just 101 yards. They were dominant in time of possession, number in the fourth quarter, 31-12. They were dominated, and they didn't have a play go for more than 10 yards until early in the fourth quarter. The Jayhawks are now 0-3 overall and 0-2 in the Big 12. Poll implications here is that the Cowboys are expected to move up a little given other upsets that occurred this week, but this is not a surprising win by any means. Let's get into another game that was pretty close. Not as close as people. It was a little closer than people expected. Number 12, North Carolina, UNC versus Boston College. This was a 26-22 win by the Tar Heels. The North Carolina Tar Heels, a closer game than many expected, like I said. North Carolina safety Trey Morrison intercepted Boston College's Phil Jorkovich's pass on a potential game-tying 2-point play and ran it back for a score with 45 seconds left on Saturday, which helped North Carolina beat Boston College 26-22. This was their pandemic-delayed second victory of the year. With their cancellation of one game because of the coronavirus and a scheduled off week leaving North Carolina eyed since September 12th, the Tar Heels, who are now 2-0, sent BC, who are now 2-1, to their first loss under new coach Steph Hartley. We were concerned about having 3 weeks off and having a sloppy game, Coach Mac Brown said, and that is what happened. Sam Howell, who was seen as a dark horse Heisman contender, completed 14 of 26 passes for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns, including a 41-yard score to Devontae Williams that gave the Carolina a 21-13 lead with just over 2 minutes left in the first half. North Carolina led 24-16 with just under 3 minutes left before Javonte drove BC into Tar Heels territory and completing 3 passes in the end zone. A week after rallying to beat Texas State, a 3-touchdown underdog, Boston College almost pulled up another comeback for what they would have been their first victory over ranked opponent since 2014. Just stated last week, Hafley told his team it would be up for grabs at the end. Big poll implications here. The Tar Heels should remain ranked for another week, and Boston College will remain unranked. So, closer game than many expected. Came down to the very end with that 2-point play. Pick 3, if you will. But let's get into another game. This was a romping victory by number 3, Florida, against the unranked South Carolina Tar Heels. Not Tar Heels, excuse me. Gamecocks. So number 3, Florida, was nearly flawless on offense in its season opener, a 21-point, 642-yard barrage that set a school record. 2 turnovers a week later made the Gators look vulnerable. Kyle Trask and Kyle Pitts hooked up for 2 more touchdowns, continuing its hot start, and led Florida to a 38-24 victory over South Carolina on Saturday. It wasn't as clean as the Gators hoped. Kyle Trask, one of their starting quarterback and a potential Heisman contender, said, "We expect to score every single time we have the ball, and we should score more every time we have the ball." Trask completed 21 of 29 passes for 268 yards and 4 touchdowns. It was his first half fumble and fourth quarter interception that kept the Gamecocks in it. Pitt paired with 4 interceptions for 557 yards, combining extra attention and beating South Carolina's top defenders. They call it the K2K connection. They now have 6 touchdowns in 2 games, one more than it was notched in 2019. The Gators finished with 348 yards and punted twice, hardly what Dan Coach Mullen was looking for in week 2. Kadarius Toney for the Gators had his best performance in 4 years. He had a 57-yard touchdown catch and turned a 7-yard reception into Florida's biggest gain. He ended with 6 receptions for 86 yards and a touchdown to go along with 42 yards on 2 punt returns. The big takeaway for this is that South Carolina probably needs a win next week to win an 0-6 start after playing Vanderbilt next week. The Gamecocks have Auburn, LSU, and Texas A&M on top. For the Florida Gators' defensive issues aside, the Gators can't seem to stop the run and have all kinds of trouble getting consistent pressure on the quarterbacks. Fun fact here is the Gators sold nearly 2,400 cardboard cutouts to fans at a cost of $79 a piece for the season, $29 for students, and sprinkled in 3 dozen celebrities in the mix. The A-list included Ric Flair, Tim Tebow, Emmitt Smith, and Tom Petty. Late ESPN writer Ed Arshoff, a Florida graduate whose first job was covering the Gators for the Gainesville Sun, had a cutoff in front of the band. Ed previously passed away on December 24th last year. He was a drummer in Florida's marching band during college. Up next, South Carolina visits Vanderbilt next Saturday, and Florida takes its Kyle to Kyle, K2K, to Kyle Field to play Texas A&M next Saturday. The Florida Gators last beat the Aggies when Johnny Manziel was there in 2012. Woo! All right, guys. Getting in some big games here. Big games. Our final games, we have 3 of the games to go over. We have number 9 Texas was upset by unranked TCU 33-31 TCU. Texas ran out of comebacks against Max Duggan and TCU. The Horned Frogs quarterback ran for the go-ahead score with 4 minutes left, and the defense made it stand with a goal line fumble recovery to beat number 9 Texas on Saturday in a game that had 26 penalties and ended with TCU taking a safety to run out the final seconds of a 33-31 victory. In doing so, the Horned Frogs, who are now 1-1 in the Big 12 and 1-1 overall, dealt another big blow to the Big 12 college football playoff hopes. Now that Texas and Oklahoma, the league's highest-ranked teams at the beginning of the season, each have early home losses to unranked opponents. TCU coach Gary Patterson said, "Find a way. We've got to take balls away." He's now 7-2 against Texas since TCU joined the Big 12 in 2012. Anybody we play in state, we know their players, so our kids play hard, and our kids, their families got a chance to come to the ball games. So, it's one of those games. Even with the history, Texas was stunned to walk off the field with a loss after being so close to another victory escape. A week ago, Texas rallied late to win in overtime against Texas Tech. Patterson never considered punting after TCU was backed up in its own end zone. Duggan led TCU's upset of Texas last season as a freshman. He made his first start of the disrupted 2020 season after missing much of training camp for being previously treated with an undiagnosed heart condition. He passed for 231 yards and ran for 79 more. Sam Ehlinger, a Heisman favorite for the Texas Longhorns, threw 4 touchdown passes on an otherwise difficult day for him. He went just 17 of 36 for 236 yards. His 14 touchdown passes in 3 games lead the nation. His last touchdown throw to Malcolm Epps gave Texas its first lead early in the fourth quarter. On the final drive, he had an option to keep the ball and hand it off to Ingram on the fumble. However, the big takeaway for this is that Texas Longhorns now find themselves in a fight to get to the Big 12 title game with a huge game against Oklahoma next week. If you guys don't know, Oklahoma was upset this week. Ehlinger couldn't do anything for the Longhorns each week. Can't do everything for the Longhorns each week. The defense needs to be better. There is no doubt about that. Texas is going to tumble out of the Big 10 in what was a very bad week for the Big 12. And our final game we will get into, people. Obviously, number 18 Oklahoma was upset in a big game in what turned out to be a very bad day for the Big 12. Iowa State demolished number 18 Oklahoma in a big upset, 37-30 Iowa State. It was another milestone win for Matt Campbell's rising program at Iowa State, and for Oklahoma and the Sooners and Spencer Rattler, this was another tough loss. Breece Hall scored the go-against touchdown on an 8-yard run with 4:06 left, and Hasheem Young intercepted Spencer Rattler's pass in the end zone on number 18 Oklahoma's final drive. The Sooners are now 1-2 and 0-2 in the Big 12. This is their first time being 0-2 in the Big 12 in quite some time. They were beaten at home by Kansas State last week, and they dropped back-to-back regular season games for the first time since 1999. They lost in Ames for the first time since 1960. It felt great to pull out a win and make history, Young said. The Cyclones were now 2-1 and 2-0 in the Big 12, wore down the Sooners with the running game of Hall. If you guys remember, this Cyclones were previously ranked, I believe. They rushed for 139 yards, and Brock Purdy passed for 254 yards and had a 2-yard touchdown run to tie it all. The win was celebrated by a crowd of 13,724 at Jack Trice Stadium. No fans were allowed for the September 12th loss to Louisiana Lafayette. Remember that upset? Big game. Rattler played a strong game. He committed no turnovers before Young stepped in front of his pass to Charleston Rambo to score one of Campbell's biggest wins in Ames. Oklahoma coach Lincoln Riley called this a very gut-wrenching loss. We are one play short. Obviously, our back is against a wall as a football team. We know that. We accept that. Our guys are hurt. Most of our guys haven't experienced a season like this. It's still about how you respond. I believe I know how this group will. Despite the sickening loss feeling in my stomach right now and how disappointed we are, we know that there are makings of a good football team in there right now. I'll continue to ride this with the team. There's a lot of guys who are down, but they're not taking out the fight. The big takeaway is that for Oklahoma, defense is still a problem, and a week after failing to protect a 21-point third quarter lead against Kansas State, the Sooners were gashed by the Cyclones. Oklahoma gave up a 65-yard touchdown pass, and the Cyclones owned a 23-20 lead. Poll implications: the Sooners will likely fall out of the top 25 after starting the season as a playoff contender, and were number 3 before losing to Kansas State last week. Oklahoma faces Texas at Dallas for the Red River Showdown on Saturday, and Iowa State will host Texas Tech on Saturday. So what are the big poll implications here? Or what are the big implications in general? Well, we saw that the Big 12 is suffering. Texas and Oklahoma, who were considered to be 2 title contenders and 2 of the Big 12's contenders, are struggling. Obviously, Oklahoma State won this week, so they'll probably move up in the polls. But Big 12 is struggling. I mean, Oklahoma was seen as probably not a given, because nothing is a given in college football, but probably a surefire lock for the top 6 at least to play a New Year's Day bowl game, and now it looks like they're out of the rankings and they're going to be struggling to get back up. Obviously, they have a talented team there with Heisman potential Spencer Rattler and the offensive mastermind of Lincoln Riley. We also know that the SEC is dominating. LSU came back after a tough loss last week, and Mississippi State looked like they could be a one-week wonder. So the SEC is proving to be a confusing conference this year, especially after Arkansas won. Arkansas has not won in years, and they are the butt of the joke of the SEC in many ways. Obviously, we have the Pac-12 coming back and the Big Ten coming back, which I will get into all on Thursday's podcast. Like I said, thank you guys so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I will be back on Thursday with all the news rundowns, previewing this week, AP polls implications, and more. Thank you guys so much for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe to us on wherever you get your podcasts. Leaving a review would really help us, and we would really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for listening once again, and I hope you all have a fantastic night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network, from football to basketball, baseball to MMA, and even soccer. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts College Football Podcast.